I didn't expect much when I took the job at WBRM 103.7. Just an overnight radio slot in a no-name mountain town, tucked into a quiet fold of the Appalachians where fog drapes the trees like a second skin, and the roads curve so hard they feel like they're trying to lose you. There's no traffic out here, no city hum, just pine, mist, and silence, so thick it starts to feel alive if you listen long enough. Still, the paycheck was decent. At least enough to scrape by if I didn't mind canned soup and spotty Wi-Fi. And after 3 months of living in my car and bouncing between gig work, I couldn't afford to be picky. The station sat half swallowed by the hillside, like someone carved out the rock, got halfway through building a cabin, then gave up. The outside was overgrown with vines and moldy siding, but the inside, it had a kind of charm. The walls were covered in faded foam paneling and cracked wood trim, and the air always smelled faintly like old coffee and wet earth. There was a tiny break room with a sagging cot, a fridge that wheezed like a dying animal, and a single coffee pot that looked like it hadn't been cleaned since the first Bush was in office. The main studio was where I spent most of my time. It had this beautiful, ancient switchboard with toggle knobs that clicked like old bones being popped into place. There was a wall of vinyls, half unlabeled, half forgotten, but something about them made me feel like I'd finally landed somewhere that mattered. Like the ghosts of better broadcasters had been here before me. I'd only been on air for 3 nights when Russ showed up during the shift change and handed me a beat-up notebook. Didn't say much at first. Just stood in the doorway holding a duffel bag, like he wasn't sure if he was walking into a new life or trying to outrun the old one. "Time to hand it off," he said, his voice raspy, like gravel rolling underfoot. He looked tired, not just in the usual way. There was something brittle about him, like a man worn down to the edge. Deep lines around his eyes, the kind that don't come from laughter. I figured he was maybe 60, but his posture said 80. When he held out the notebook, I hesitated. He didn't let go until I took it. "You don't break the rules," he said, and for a second his eyes locked onto mine, like he needed me to believe him. "Doesn't matter what you think. Just follow the damn rules." I thought it was a joke at first. Some kind of weird hazing ritual, like handing the new girl a fake ghost story to scare her on her first solo shift. But the way he held that duffel bag like it was the only thing tying him to the ground, I knew he wasn't kidding. I almost laughed. But I didn't. Russ walked out without another word, didn't even look back. I watched from the doorway as he disappeared into the trees at the edge of the lot, headlights bouncing once, then gone. I sat down, set the notebook on the desk, and stared at it for a while. The cover was soft, worn leather, cracked at the edges. Looked like it had passed through a lot of hands. I flipped it open. 4 rules, each one written in thick, blocky letters. Like someone had pressed the pen down too hard in a shaking hand. Rule 1, never acknowledge the listener in the static. It starts after 2 a.m. You'll hear something extra under the music. A whisper. Sometimes it sings, sometimes it mutters, sometimes it says your name. If you acknowledge it, it knows. If it knows, it comes closer. I read it 3 times, then closed the book. I wasn't superstitious, at least not yet. But that night, after 2 a.m., I was halfway through introducing a Muddy Waters track when I heard it, just under the guitar. Like the static was breathing. I leaned in, thinking maybe it was just a weird radio artifact. Old records do weird things sometimes. But then I heard it, a voice, low, brittle. It didn't speak a language I knew at first. It hummed along in this soft, broken pattern, like someone learning to mimic a tune by ear. Then, right before the first verse came in, it said my name, clear as a bell. Not shouted, not whispered like a friend teasing you from across a room, just there. Sitting in the static like it had always belonged. I froze. My hand hovered over the volume slider. I looked at the switchboard. Everything was normal. No red lights, no glitch, just clean signal, just me. And it. I wanted to speak. I almost did. That's the worst part. There was this strange pull in my chest, like it wanted me to ask, "Who's there?" But I didn't. Instead, I swallowed hard, turned the volume down low, queued up 2 songs back to back, and kept my eyes firmly off the corner window. The whisper didn't stop right away. It lingered, like something was pacing just outside the edge of the station, watching me through the wall. Then it was gone, and the air felt different. lighter, less full, like something that had pressed its face to the glass had finally taken a step back. I didn't go near the window the rest of the night. I didn't sleep either. I sat at the desk until dawn, my eyes flicking back to the switchboard every time the static crackled a little too long between tracks. The next night, I opened the notebook again. I flipped past Rule 1, and that's when I saw it. The second rule was underlined. Twice. Keep the window covered. If you see someone standing out there, they're not real. If they smile, don't smile back. I read it 5 times before I even noticed my hand was resting on the switchboard. My fingers had gone stiff. I flexed them, shook out my wrist, and shut the notebook. I didn't need more to think about. I hadn't noticed the window much before. It was a narrow pane behind the main console, partially hidden by a faded green curtain. During the day, it just looked out onto trees and rock and more trees. I remembered the view from my interview, sunlight filtering through pines, a few hawks riding thermals out toward the ridge. Honestly, it was kind of beautiful. But that night I started noticing it for the wrong reasons. It was too quiet. The kind of quiet that made your ears ring. The only sounds were the needle on the record and the low thump of the fridge kicking on in the break room every 30 minutes. And under that, my own heartbeat. It was after 1 a.m. when I found myself staring at the curtain. I wasn't even thinking about it, just drawn to it, like my eyes needed to check something my brain hadn't agreed to. I stood up, took 2 slow steps toward the glass. The curtain didn't move. There was no breeze, no draft. The air was still and dry. I reached out, gently tugging the edge of the curtain back a couple inches, just enough to peek through. At first there was nothing, just fog creeping low across the clearing. The trees looked like silhouettes, thin and endless. The station lights behind me reflected faintly on the glass. And then I saw it, a figure, standing just at the edge where the hills sloped downward into the gulch. Still. Too still. They weren't walking, or fidgeting, or even breathing. Just standing there, arms at their sides, head tilted slightly to the left like they were listening to something just out of reach. I let the curtain fall shut. My hand had gone cold. I backed away slowly, not taking my eyes off the fabric. I sat down, adjusted the mic even though it didn't need adjusting, and kept talking. I played 2 more tracks back to back. Jazz, I think. I barely heard it. The rule had said not to smile back. That's what stuck with me. I hadn't smiled. I hadn't even made eye contact, but I couldn't shake the feeling that it knew I had looked, that it had been waiting for me to do just that. The next hour dragged. I couldn't concentrate. I kept glancing at the window, even though the curtain stayed closed. Every little shift in the shadows felt wrong. The studio lights flickered once, around 2:15, but came right back. When my shift ended at 6, I waited until the sun was fully up before unlocking the door. The trees were still. There was no sign of anyone out there, no tracks, just damp leaves and that stubborn wall of fog pressed into the woods. Before I left, I checked the window again from the inside. No handprints, no marks. Still, I pinned the curtain shut. I told myself it was for privacy, that I didn't want to get distracted. But that night, I brought a blanket from my car and tacked it up over the curtain, just in case the original one slipped. I didn't want to take chances. Not after what Russ had said before he left. He'd only told me one story, and he said it like it hurt to remember. There was a girl once, another DJ before me, he never said her name. She liked to keep the window open while she worked, said she liked the dark, said it made her feel calm. She started waving back to the people outside. Thought it was hikers. Late-night truckers passing through. Then one morning, she didn't sign off. The station manager found the place locked up tight, the mic still warm, headphones still playing soft jazz. There was no sign of a struggle, no forced entry, no notes, just the curtain pulled wide open, and one handprint on the outside of the glass, 5 inches too high for anyone to have reached. I haven't looked out the window since, and I don't plan to. I found Rule 3 a few days after the window incident. I'd been sleeping less and drinking more coffee that tasted like burnt plastic. The cot in the break room creaked so loudly every time I rolled over that I stopped trying to nap on it altogether. I just stayed in the booth, kept the mic warm, and read through Russ's notebook 1 rule at a time, like maybe spacing them out would make them feel less real. But Rule 3 didn't give me that luxury. Never let the call go past 1 minute. After midnight, the phone rings. Doesn't matter if the lines are turned off, doesn't matter if you unplug it, it rings. The voice is slow, it stretches time, you have 60 seconds. If the call hits that mark, something comes through. The landline at WBRM was a squat black thing mounted next to the soundboard. It had rotary buttons that stuck a little, and a faded sticker on the side that just said Studio A. It didn't have call ID, no screen, nothing modern. Russ had written a note above it in red Sharpie. Don't answer unless you have a timer. That first week, it didn't ring. I figured the rule was more ghost story than warning, maybe something Russ threw in for drama. Then came Friday night. It was 12:02 a.m. I had just finished introducing a set list and leaned back in the chair with a mug of stale coffee when the line rang once. I jumped. It rang again. I looked at the board. All phone lines were toggled off. My laptop wasn't connected to anything, and the Wi-Fi barely worked as it was. There should have been no way for a call to come through. It rang a third time. I reached for it, then stopped. My hand hovered over the receiver, heart thumping hard enough that I could feel it in my throat. I pulled my phone out of my hoodie pocket, opened the stopwatch app, and rested my thumb on start. Then I answered. WBRM, you're on the air, I said. There was no response at first, just a crackling hiss like someone breathing through a wet towel, then a voice. Low. Male, maybe, or maybe it was just tired or buried. Is there rain still falling? I hit the timer. Nope, I said quickly. It's dry tonight, real foggy though, thick enough to chew. A pause. The pine is wet. I glanced at the stopwatch. 14 seconds. I swallowed and leaned forward. Yeah, probably, I said. Humidity's weird up here. That all you needed? I heard the door open. 23 seconds. My eyes flicked toward the studio door. It was still closed, locked. The deadbolt was turned, same as always. Wrong house, I said, voice cracking just a little. You've got the wrong... I see you. I hung up at 37 seconds. The silence that followed was worse than the voice. I didn't move. I just sat there, eyes on the phone, waiting for it to ring again. But it didn't, not that night. The next shift, I came in with a notepad, a timer, and a better plan. It rang again just after midnight. I answered with the timer already running. The voice was different this time. Higher, but still thick. Muffled. They asked what record was playing. Asked if the lights were still flickering. Asked if I had ever noticed the sound under the sound. I cut the call at 55 seconds. That became my routine. I never let it go longer than a minute. And they always tried to stretch it out, asking small talk questions, talking slow, drawing things out like they knew the clock was running. I got used to it, or as used to it as I could be. But one night, my thumb slipped. I hit start on the stopwatch, but the screen didn't light up. The timer didn't run. I answered anyway, figuring I'd just keep an eye on the studio clock. Big mistake. The caller was different this time. The voice had an echo, like it was coming from the bottom of a well. They asked if I was alone, if the window was still covered, if I could hear the knock. I froze. What knock? Then I heard it. From the hallway behind me. 3 soft knocks, evenly spaced like someone rapping gently on wood with their knuckles. I looked back toward the break room. Dark, still, but I felt it, that pull in the air, like something was waiting. I hung up. The hallway lights flickered, one by one, starting at the far end, clicking on in slow rhythm until they stopped just outside the break room door. I stood. I didn't walk toward it. I didn't move. Something knocked from inside the fridge. 3 times. Soft, wet. I didn't open it. I didn't go near it. I waited until daylight, sitting cross-legged on the studio floor, holding a flashlight and the phone, watching the hallway. When the sun finally pushed through the trees, the lights shut off. Everything went still again. I got up, walked to the break room, and stood outside the fridge. There was a single wet footprint on the tile, just one, leading nowhere. Rule 4 sat at the bottom of the page, written in thicker ink than the others. Like Russ had gone over it again and again, pressing the pen harder with every pass. Play the Mountainside Hymn before sunrise. It's not labeled. You'll know it by the dust. If you skip it, morning doesn't come right. The day folds in on itself. People vanish. Voices sound wrong. The town forgets who you are. I didn't want to believe it. The other rules, sure, they scared me, but they felt like things I could manage. Don't listen. Don't look. Don't talk for too long. But this one felt different. Like it wasn't just about the station anymore. Like it was about everything. The record wasn't hard to find. I'd seen it before, tucked near the bottom of a dusty shelf in the storage room, wedged between a box of moldy weather tapes and a broken mic stand. No label, no markings. Just a warped old sleeve with more dust on it than anything else in the room. When I pulled it out, my hands shook. It wasn't the cold, it was something else. Something in the weight of it. Like I was holding more than vinyl. Like the air shifted slightly around it. I brought it into the booth and left it on the console, staring at it for half the night like it might speak up and tell me what it really was. I didn't play it that night. The sunrise came anyway, or at least, I thought it did. The next morning, everything felt off. When I walked into town to grab groceries, the woman at the gas station didn't greet me. Not in the usual, half-awake, small-town way. She looked straight through me like I wasn't there. I had to say, "Good morning," twice before she even flinched. Her name tag was missing, her eyes were glassy. I drove past the diner and saw every table filled, but no one eating. They just sat there, staring at their menus like they couldn't read them. That afternoon, I called my sister. The line rang 6 times and went to voicemail. I texted her. The message never sent. My phone had bars but no data, no connection, just a spinning wheel. I went back to the station and played the hymn. It wasn't a song. Not really. It started with a low, dragging tone, like mountain wind blowing through rusted pipes, followed by a distant chime, like a bell tolling underwater. The sound hit me in the chest like a wave. Not pain. Not exactly. Just pressure. Like the world was holding its breath. The tones stretched out forever. There was no rhythm, no melody, just long, low vibrations that seemed to pull the room slightly out of focus. The air shimmered. The floor felt less solid. I watched the signal light on the board pulse in time with the drone, even though nothing was wired to it. I sat through the whole thing, 13 minutes, give or take. When it ended, I felt hollow. Like something had reached into my ribs and taken just enough to make me notice. But the next morning, the town was normal again. The gas station clerk waved like usual. The diner smelled like bacon and grease. My sister called me back like nothing was wrong. I didn't tell her about the hymn. After that, I didn't miss it again. Even on nights when I was too tired to think straight, I played it. Always before sunrise. Always before the first light touched the trees on the ridge. Once, I waited too long. Just a few minutes past dawn. I hadn't realized it until I walked outside. The sky was wrong. The clouds moved too fast. The shadows on the road curved the wrong way. The birds weren't singing. They were making a sound that almost was birdsong, but not quite. Like someone trying to imitate it from memory. I ran back in and dropped the needle without even cleaning it first. The tone crackled through the air, and for a second I thought it wouldn't work. Then, slowly, everything settled. The sky stilled. The sounds normalized. The shadows realigned. I stared at the switchboard. All the signal lights were red. Every single one. Then they blinked off, one by one. The next day, I didn't remember brushing my teeth, or changing clothes, or eating. After that, I moved the hymn to the front of the shelf and wrote "Play This" in permanent marker across the sleeve. Some nights, when I cue it up, I feel something watching. Not the whisper and the static, not the thing at the window, something else. By my second week, I had memorized the rules. I didn't need to check the notebook anymore. They were etched into my routine. The shift had become a rhythm. Watch the static, cover the window, time the calls, play the hymn. Over and over like a ritual I didn't understand but didn't dare break. But the nights were getting stranger. It wasn't just the whispering, or the figures outside, or the knocking. Those I could manage. Those I had names for. It was everything else. The music started skipping. Not in a normal way. No scratches, no surface noise. Just missing time. Songs that should have been 4 minutes ended after 2. Vinyls that used to play normally now looped on odd phrases like the records were warping themselves overnight. I heard my own voice once, faintly, between 2 tracks, a segment I hadn't recorded. I was talking about the fog like it was alive, laughing, but the laugh didn't sound like mine. I stopped using the auto-record feature after that. That's when I started digging. The station's filing cabinet hadn't been touched in years. I found old logs, playlist reports from decades ago, tape reels with dates but no labels. Most of them were ruined, mildewed, warped, or melted into unreadable plastic, but a few still worked. I rigged up the tape deck in the break room and started listening during the day. Just clips, here and there, enough to catch voices. There were others before me, at least 6, maybe more. One of them, I think her name was Dana, spoke in a warm, fast voice, like she was trying to fill the silence with energy. Her last tape cut off mid-sentence. Another, an older man, played nothing but country gospel. He kept clearing his throat between songs, like he was about to say something but changed his mind. One reel ended with the sound of knocking, loud, fast, desperate, and then nothing. No static, no end tone. Just dead air. I stopped after that. I didn't want to know how they all ended. I just needed to understand why Russ stayed so long. I found the answer under the cot. The mattress had a slit near the seam, stitched up crudely with fishing line. Inside, wrapped in an old flannel shirt, was a second notebook. His handwriting was looser, sloppier. Like it had been written late at night, without much light. It learns. That's what I didn't know. At first, it just watched. Then it tried things. It mimics, adapts. The voice in the static, it said my daughter's name. The one I never told anyone about. The one buried in Georgia. I answered it. Once, just once. I heard her voice on the phone a week later. She was crying, asking why I left, begging me to come home. I nearly did. There were whole pages like that. Confessions, half-thoughts, warnings scrawled in red ink when the black ran dry. If it gets in, it doesn't leave. Not really. One line was underlined so many times the paper had nearly torn. You can survive it. You just have to keep the shape of the night. I didn't know what that meant. Still don't. But I taped the page to the back of the booth wall where I could see it during my shift. I needed to remember that I wasn't alone in this, that someone had made it longer than a few days. That night, everything got worse. The whisper in the static didn't just say my name, it said my voice. It repeated sentences I'd spoken earlier in the night, but slower, twisted at the end. It laughed like me. But wrong. The figure outside the window came closer. I didn't see it, but I knew. The curtain swelled, not with wind but pressure, like something was pressing its forehead against the glass. The phone rang 5 times between midnight and 2 a.m. The last call lasted 59 seconds. I almost didn't hang up. The voice on the line wasn't slow this time. It was sharp, familiar. It said, "I'm you." Just that, just once. Then silence. I cut the line and waited. Nothing happened. No lights, no knocks. But when I went into the break room at dawn, the mirror above the sink was fogged over from the inside. Someone had written in the glass, "Stay." I wiped it clean. I didn't tell anyone. I haven't told anyone anything. Not even Russ. But I think I understand why he left the notebook instead of just walking away. Because you don't really leave. You either make it through the night, or you disappear trying. And if you disappear, someone has to take your place. I gave my notice on a Monday. No one seemed surprised. The station manager didn't ask questions. Just nodded and scribbled something into a legal pad with a half-dead pen, like I'd told him the weather report instead of, "I'm done risking my soul for minimum wage and moldy coffee." My last shift was supposed to be just like any other. One more night. One more list of rules to follow. I told myself if I stuck to them, if I didn't look, didn't speak, didn't forget the hymn, I could make it out clean. But the night had other plans. Everything felt wrong the moment I stepped into the booth. The air was colder, heavier. The static that usually sat quiet between tracks buzzed louder, like the station itself was holding its breath. I hung my coat, locked the door behind me, and pulled out my notebook. Not Russ's. Mine. I had copied the rules onto a clean page, written my own notes beside each one, little reminders. Rule 1, ignore the whisper. Rule 2, keep the curtain closed. Rule 3, never go past 1 minute. Rule 4, play the hymn before sunrise. The phone rang early, right at midnight. I timed it. The voice was gentle, almost kind, asking me if I remembered what my voice used to sound like before I came here. I hung up at 49 seconds. The curtain shifted. Not from wind. There was no wind. The air was still and tight and warm like breath. I didn't look. Instead, I pressed record and did the show like it was any other night. Announcements, song breaks, requests from listeners that didn't exist. At 3:12 a.m., every light on the board blinked red at once, then off, then back on. Something was watching me through the static. I felt it. But I kept going. I watched the time crawl toward dawn, my last sunrise. At 5:32 a.m., I stood and reached for the record shelf. The hymn wasn't there. My fingers skimmed every slot. I checked the floor. I opened the storage cabinet. Empty. The blank sleeve was gone. Panic hit fast. I tore through the booth, heart racing, hands shaking. I pulled open every drawer, moved aside every tape reel, checked behind the cot. Nothing. The sun was already brushing the edge of the ridge. Pale light stretched across the trees like a warning. Then I saw it. The hymn sat outside, just beyond the threshold, on the front steps like someone had placed it there. I opened the station door. Cold air rushed in, damp and sour like moss and old metal. The fog was low, hugging the ground. I stepped out barefoot, too focused to notice the sting of the stone under my feet. The record was waiting. I bent down slowly, keeping my eyes on the tree line. Nothing moved, not yet. When I picked it up, my fingers burned. Not heat, just wrong, like the grooves were shifting under my touch. I brought it inside, locked the door, and dropped the needle without cleaning it. The sound hit instantly. The tones dragged through the studio, slow and sour and deep. The floor trembled. The lights dimmed. My breath caught in my throat and stayed there, but I kept it playing. Outside, something scratched lightly at the window. It didn't knock, it didn't tap, just a slow, dry scrape, back and forth, like it was writing something I wasn't meant to read. I didn't look. The hymn ended right as the sun broke over the ridge. The scratch stopped. The lights steadied. And the silence that followed wasn't empty. It was relief. I knew then that I had made it. Not safe, not clean, but out. I left the station that morning, leaving my notebook on the table. I wrote one last note at the bottom of the rules in fresh ink. If you make it through, leave the door locked, leave the mic warm, leave the hymn where they can find it. WBRM still plays at night. I tune in sometimes from towns farther down the mountain, just to check, just to hear. Sometimes the static feels too loud. Sometimes the silence between songs stretches a little too long. Sometimes I think I hear my voice, older, thinner, repeating something I don't remember saying. And deep down, I know I never really left.